Baby, well, I should get my head and got a cut on my head. I should get my head and asked baby for a pudding, and you left me like a clown.
And here it is, Alan Freed's Rock and Roll Party. And here he is in person, Alan Freed.
Hello, everybody. How y'all? Welcome to our Rock and Roll Jubilee of Stars. And here we go to rockin'.
New York City, certainly the home of the vocal group sound. Not that vocal groups didn't come from a lot of other areas, but we always think of New York. And New York is where the word acappella was created.
All of us were born shortly after World War II. We all grew up with rock and roll. My early years when I was growing up, I lived in Brooklyn. So I remember going to the RKO and wishing that I could see Alan Freed, but I didn't. But instead I saw, I went to shows at the Apollo Theater in New York. I went to the RKO Kenmore and the Rialto and saw the Mary Decay show. I saw some of the shows that Phil Spector produced, like the Ronettes and things like that. All of us did that in those days, so we all have a connection to the 50s in terms of the singing groups, because it was the singing groups, the black singing groups that we admired. The songs that they sang, we sang, except we just put a little bit of a different take on it.
Five Sharks, The Rituals, Foretells, The Routines. I like that name. The Routines and the Concepts. Hi, I'm Rick Addy. I'm the owner of Shake, Rattle, and Read. Acappella kind of grew out of the doo-wop scene. It's more of a New York thing, East Coast, New Jersey, New York. Young teenagers that grew up on doo-wop and emulated that stuff, singing on the streets, street corners, and in the subways where there's some echo. Of course, doo-wop came from back in the 40s and the 50s. Young black men, mostly, that started a style of singing because they couldn't afford certain musical instruments.
The launching of the a cappella sound began in a small, now famous record store in New York City on 42nd Street in the heart of the then sleazy Times Square. It was the now legendary Times Square Records, run by Irving Slim Rose. A cappella started when Slim was presented with practice tapes from Wayne Sterling and Don Folletti. Some of the tapes were sung without music, being just demos to showcase the songs, but Slim wanted to release them, but he wanted to make it clear there was no musical band on the records. He thought people would return the records if there wasn't any musical background. After a heated debate, Slim went to a dictionary and chose a cappella. But writing it as one word thereby created a word that had never existed in that form. It was 1963, and this was the first time the word had ever been used in that form.
Groups who sang from the 1950s, we just called them rhythm and blues, R&B, or we just called them, you know, group singers or something like that. But there was never a term a cappella, or there was never a term called doo-wop. No one would say to you, let's do some doo-wop. You know, no one ever said that because it didn't exist, those terms.
We didn't even know that we were singing a cappella. One night, a lady leaned out the window and she said, "You guys really sound great. If you don't know what you're singing, it's called a cappella."
In this sense, a cappella meant rhythm and blues or rock and roll vocal groups singing without any backing.
Now, here's that crucial moment that we wait for every week.
I'm on a chain, yes, a chain of broken hearts.
Where it all began, some projects, right.
All of us were born and raised here.
just for a matter of record, Frankie Valli's family lived here. Frankie's mom lived down that other end, and then when Frankie started to have hits, he was still living in the village. He wanted to make sure the success would last, and then eventually, you know, he just kind of...
I used to hear them rehearsing.
All right.
See, well, they used to be the Four Lovers before they were the Four Seasons.
Now, we used to come under this bridge when we were kids. This was our echo spot. You can tell. And we did some nice harmony here. It was really great. This is the housing project. This is Newark, New Jersey, by the way. This is Stephen Crane Village. It's a housing project where we grew up.
This is where a lot of the groups used to rehearse in the alleyway. There used to be a pool hall up there, right where C.H. Martin is, and that's where the Concepts came from. They used to hang out up there and practice.
Growing up in Jersey City, music was always part of my life, and music was always part of my friends' lives, my friends that I hung around with. So it was just a natural thing for us just to be in a choir or be in an ensemble.
Growing up as a kid on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, I used to lie awake at night and listen to the older guys on the block harmonizing on the street corner or downstairs underneath my building in the lobby. And I remember getting goosebumps because I couldn't believe that 4 or 5 voices could fill up just a space like that and deliver some of the most melodic and beautiful tones and sounds that I had ever heard.
And it was during gym class in a locker room where I heard 3 guys off in the corner hitting some notes. And I'll never forget the impact that had on me. I wondered how they could make that music without the aid of any music.
And it was a beautiful summer night, and right by the East River. I guess there were 5 guys and me. Anyway, this one guy started singing the lead to One Summer Night. And mild-mannered Phil, who I had known as just one of the guys for years in the neighborhood, tall, straight black hair Italian guy. And all of a sudden, out of his voice comes this deep, rich bass going, do, do, do. And Tommy was a first tenor, and he hits the ooh, and Phil hits the ooh, and these other 2 guys hit the ooh. And this magic chord came out and just blew my mind.
And I knew then, as a 12-year-old and 13-year-old, that when I got a little bit older and my, cojones got a little bit larger, I would venture out and see if I could be part of what those guys were doing.
And ever since then, I knew I had to be a part of doo-wop,
I came to New York in '62. I wanted to become a professional football player. Wow, was I way off with that. But I started playing semi-pro ball. At that time, most people that was coming north to better their lifestyle. I landed in Brooklyn instead of Rochester, and I became friends of a guy, his name was Beatrice Bess. Now, Bess worked at a company, believe it or not, that printed album covers. Oh my goodness gracious. I just wanted to be on one of those album covers. I used to say, my God, wonder what it's like to be on an album cover. The album covers that I was printing at the time had Johnny Mathis, Nat King Cole, Frank Sinatra, and Bess, after we would finish work, he would get together with some of the guys there and we would start singing. Well, Bess took it one step farther. He went and got us a little bootleg manager, and the bootleg manager got us at the amateur hour at the Apollo Theater. Out of that group came the Persuasions. In fact, I signed the contracts to sing with the Persuasions on the football field, believe it or not.
Some places where I could buy records of early Motown, early soul,
was a place called Square Records in Journal Square, Jersey City, New Jersey. So I used to either have to hop on the bus down to Journal Square Records or take my bike, it's a few miles, and down there looking through the bins of old soul music. Didn't know nothing about a cappella back then. One night I was down there, it was a Friday evening, and walked in late at night about 6:30, 1965, and there was this group in the back singing without any instruments. And I'm there looking through records, and I'm listening to this group sing in the back of Journal Square Records shop, and I'm going, what the heck is that? You know, there's no instruments. And I was just falling in love with the music. And they were called the Royal Counts. They were from Dickinson High School in Jersey City. That was my first ever a cappella group I heard in the back of Journal Square Records. He says, you're going to have to drive the Royal Counts to the show. The Kings of a cappella at that time were a group called the Chessmen. And the Chessmen were at this show. And the Royal Counts were going out there to challenge the Chessmen for who were going to be the kings of a cappella. So we go out there, and they had to warm up. So as I was driving them out there, they were warming up in my car, and they were singing all their tunes. And at that point, I was hooked forever to a cappella. It all happened in my 4-cylinder Tempest with the transmission that skipped. I'll always remember that day.
The a cappella doo-wop vocal group harmony scene as we know it today started in the 60s, but had its origin in the R&B vocal group style of the 1950s. Most vocal groups had grown up loving the music of the 40s, which included very successful black role models such as the Mills Brothers and mainly the Ink Spots. Even the 8-year-old Frankie Lyman was listening to the radio when the Ink Spots called it quits in 1950. Little wonder that early rock and roll group recordings were backed by bands made up of 1940s pop and jazz musicians. During the 1950s, almost half of the top artists were black vocal groups. Disc jockeys like Alan Freed, Jocko, and others promoted the rhythm and blues group sound to a wide audience that included white and black teenagers. Previously, the black stations had catered to black adults, but that was changing fast. Black adults were not fans of this new music and turned more to popular and gospel music to escape the new music that they considered, in some cases, to be anti-religious. The dynamic personalities of the disc jockeys brought the music to black and white teenagers who loved the sounds and weren't bothered by the color line that adults were involved in. Non-black singing groups gravitated to this new genre rather than to traditional pop music. As television grew stronger, teenagers were able to see for the first time the very groups they had only heard on the radio, though only a few rock and roll R&B acts truly made it to TV. Television, like radio, was run by adults who thought it was all a silly fad that would soon end. In fact, most adults gave it 6 months to last. What better place in New York to find an echo than down in the subway? But you know, in the New York area, New York and New Jersey in particular, we weren't looking for an echo. We knew where it was. We knew where the echoes were, and we found them in the New York area.
The 60s were a magical time. And the street corners back then were our mall today. Everyone and everybody hung out on the street corners, and that was the place to be. And if you were lucky enough to sing with a group and sound good singing with that group, you were one of the cool guys.
On Friday nights, Mark and Eddie and Steve and I and Sal, we'd hop on the subway and go down to Greenwich Village. And Those of you who remember Greenwich Village back in those days, it was teeming. People all over the place on a Friday night going to the different cafes and jazz being played and folk singers up and down in the coffee shops. Well, we used to plant ourselves on one of the more visible street corners, and we'd start singing. And in about 15 to 20 minutes, I'd say, the crowd would start to grow. But I mean, it got large. Several hundred. It got to a point on a lot of the evenings where the police would have to come in and break us up because we were stopping traffic. And man, that was exciting. That was really exciting. Beside the fact, you know, as you're standing there in the street corner and the girls are walking by, you're trying to figure out whether or not you can hook up later on in the evening.
Like a lot of groups in those days, you know, all they were interested in was getting discovered. You know, let's get discovered. But, you know, we'll sing on the street corners, we'll sing down in the subway. Somebody will hear us, and waiting after work, they'll hear us and they'll discover us. And so the subways was a big thing for us.
I remember once singing in a subway station, and we just sang a fantastic version of Sunday Kind of Love. But there was nobody around to listen to it. So somebody had an idea, why don't we put some money in the phone booth and call the operator up? Maybe she'll listen to us. Well, she did. She listened to the entire song, thought it was great, and we finally had our audience.
We was just some guys on the block singing. After a basketball game, 10, 15 guys would just start singing.
We sang everywhere. We'd be in the movies and we'd sing something during intermission or something. And we used to go all over the city and sing under every tunnel we could find.
We'd go into one of the coffee shops, but we didn't have any money. Of course, we weren't making any money from all the records we were making at the time, but it didn't matter. We'd go into the coffee shop, and then we would sit down at the table, no money, and we'd sing one or two songs. And for that, we got hamburgers and hot chocolate. Man, life wasn't any better than that.
It's me, whoop, 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 whoopie, whoop. Well, I don't want a chest full of gold, just want someone to have and to hold.
My name's Dennis Nagel, and I got interested in a cappella probably in the mid-'60s when it first started to become popular. Groups like the Zircons, the Royal Counts were a little bit later, but absolutely loved it. I've been a record collector for the last, since maybe 9 or 10 years old, and just love the music until, and carry it today. I sing with an amateur, not an amateur, but we've sang professionally for many years with a group. And may I mention Joanne and the Heartaches? I went to see them in a show produced by Stan Krause in the late 1960s, featuring the Royal Counts, and Joanne and the Heartaches were there. It was an absolute great show. The Persuasions have perpetuated a cappella. There was a group called Vintage that really absolutely kept my interest alive. And to this day, I still enjoy in my CD collection many of the old standards performed by the a cappella groups.
It's made a difference in my youth, my middle years, and my present age. It is something that has been an accomplishment that can't be bought or purchased in a store or put on a shelf as a collectible.
You want me to say something? Say your name. Shelley Bachansky, original second tenor of Vito and the Salutations. Now performing with them as well as the 5 discs. Acapella another group called Silk City, and I'm also backing up Kid Kyle.
It's a jump start.
Yeah, it's a new thing. It's a new endeavor. We're his backup group now, three of us. These three guys.
And how long have you been singing, Joe?
Singing since I was a teenager, which was a long time ago.
Started with acapella.
I started with acapella, and we, like everybody else on the street corners of Brooklyn, and still at it. 66 years old, and I'm still at it.
You're the love he sent to me. You're the one I wanted to be. Spend my days with only you. Giving all the love I have. You're the one I wanted to be.
My name is Hector Rosado. I started the Five Jades back in the summer of '63, along with Spencer Jackson. We then recruited Ray Goodwin, Bobby Figueroa, and Joey Figueroa. We immediately started working on the Five Jades album, Velvet Soul for Lovers Only. A lot of our songs wound up on vintage 45 record company labels, like Your Choice, Cowboy Records, and Pyramid Records. We also were on the Best of Relic, Best of Acappella, Volumes 2, 6, and 7.
One he sent to me for eternity. The love I have for you inside my soul, my heart I give to you, 'cause you're the one, the love I have for you inside my soul, my heart I give to you, 'cause you're the one.
New recordings in this style followed, and the architects of the new style were Wayne Sturley of Snowflake Candlelight Records, Stan Krause of Catamount Records, Eddie Grice of Relic Records, and of course Slim of Times Square Records. These four individuals were basically responsible for starting the new pop culture genre of the 60s, which was to be forever known as one word, Acappella.
Started basically in New York City and Jersey City, right on the Hudson River. And Irving Slim Rose was the person who kind of launched this whole thing, and along with Wayne Sturley. And Wayne Sturley was a record producer, and they were only a few years older than we were. The guys who started producing acapella recordings were born around 1942, 1943, and we were born just right after World War II. So there was maybe a three to 5 year difference in terms of age between us. So the guys who started this were basically all under age 25.
We really didn't know how to sing. We went out on the street. The streets of Jersey City became our classroom. We learned something from one person, something from another person. Before you knew it, in a couple of years, we had a sound we were looking for.
To make a long story short, we met this guy by the name of Stan Krause, who owned a record shop in Journal Square in Jersey City.
What we used to do was write 4 or 5 songs. Then we'd go down to New York. I believe it was Variety Sound, just off Times Square. And we'd record them, make demos. And one day we were doing just that, and the door opened up to the studio, and in walked this kid. And he introduced himself as Stan Krause. And he asked if we'd like to do some a cappella songs for an album he was putting together. And that was a foolish question, because that's what we lived for. And that album turned out to be I Dig Acappella, which was the first Acappella album of its kind.
We had one of those old Webcore reel-to-reel recorders, and we used to tape ourselves.
You could say they were bare-boned. I won't say rustic, but really, how many did you need? You needed a couple of mics, you had 5 guys, 6 guys, and that was all you needed.
I also worked at a recording studio as a porter. Cleaned the toilets and mopped the floors and went for coffee and things like that. But I would sneak in. I had the keys. So I'd sneak into the studio with my group or whoever was around. You know, some of the guys from the group and some guys from other groups, some of the guys from the Del Satins would get together with us and we'd just go in and sing stuff and I'd record it. You know, I'd get us all set up. I'd be in the control room and get the balances and everything. Then I'd hit the tape and I'd run in and record a track and then I'd play that back and overdub and we'd add more background parts.
I apologize. For leaving you so sad.
I believe the first recording session was a 2-hour session. The second recording session was held in Kearney, New Jersey, and lasted 4 hours. So basically, I think we were in the studio a total of 6 hours.
In the very beginning, during the Acappella era, 45s, it was pretty much at its peak of 45s. People would buy a 45, you know, and there was 2 songs, one song on one side, one song on the other side, and it was usually like 2 minutes long. Prior to commercial recordings that were made, that was a cappella. There were a cappella choirs and a cappella ensembles in colleges, but they never made a commercial recording of a cappella music. And also, when they made these vinyl 45s and LPs, they did something that was totally unique. What they did is that instead of having the standard black 45 or the standard black LP, they made 45s and LPs that were in different colors, red, blue, yellow, and so forth. So it was a really good marketing scheme on the part of these young guys who were all under 25. When standard record companies like Mercury, Columbia, or Atlantic produced LPs, they would produce LPs with 1 artist or 1 group and 12 songs. The a cappella industry was totally different. Instead of producing 12 songs, they produced 16 or more. And instead of producing 1 group, they produced 5 or more. This made the a cappella industry stand out among their peers. To my knowledge, 99.9% of the groups who sang and who made commercial recordings that were sold in stores and who had their music played on the radio, none of us really got paid for it. None of us at all.
You know, in looking back, do I have any regrets about not getting paid for what we did? I would say no.
It's not a full-time profession. It's not a money maker. And then, it certainly wasn't back then. Lord knows we didn't do it for the money. That's for sure.
It was kind of a unspoken thing, is that it really didn't amount to that much money. You know, it was like 1 cent or 2 cents for a song or something like that. So it really didn't amount to that much. And for us, it wasn't so much getting paid. It was the idea that we're going to be on stage and people are going to applaud us and people are going to you know, say, hey, I love that group. You know, we just did it because we wanted all, you know, all the fanfare of being on stage and people liking, you know, liking the way we sang.
Stan Krause of Catamount Records, one of the few pioneers in the development and promotion of the a cappella sound, discovered the Persuasions, who became in the 1970s the godfathers of a cappella. His discovery of the Persuasions helped the new art form into a more mainstream and popular context. Besides discovering the Persuasions and other groups, he was one of the first to produce full-length albums of promising groups, as well as starting and showcasing a cappella shows called A Cappella Reviews, live shows. His work in the 1960s and early 70s solidified the a cappella sound as a legitimate art form.
Stan started producing some shows at the Journal Square Theater, which was right next door to Journal Square Records. It was like Stan had the record store and then there was the State Theater there. So he started producing some a cappella shows there.
We was on an a cappella show in Jersey City. Now that's the first time that we had ran into a cappella groups.
And he said that there's this group coming over from Brooklyn that also is on the Catamount label, and they're going to tear everybody up. And I said, there ain't nobody going to tear up the Royal Counts.
There was about 10 or 15 a cappella groups on that show. But all of those a cappella groups was from New Jersey.
When you had shows like that where you had 5 or 6 different groups performing, it was like the battle of the groups. You know, it was a battle.
I was backstage at the show, and I remember the Heartaches warming up on the steps, and I was going to say, oh man, they're going after the Counts tonight. You know, they were great. So then we get out there, and the group started coming on and performing, and of course the Counts were going on last, so this group from Brooklyn had to go on before the Counts. And out on stage come the Persuasions.
We were hot that night. We had a different style of a cappella. All of the groups that was on that show, they were singing a cappella like Gloria, it's not Sherry, boom. Well, we came out and we sung, if it's love that you're running from, boom, boom, there's no hiding place. Can't run, you can't hide, you can't run. Of course, the Temptations was doing it at the time, and we was stepping and we was just going, so the audience just got in behind us.
We turned the joint out. That's what we did. We did what the Persuasions do.
We had a boop boop beat and a boom boom bang.
They had a whole new way of doing a cappella. They clapping their hands, stomping their feet.
They recorded that show. They sent that recording to Frank Zappa. Frank Zappa heard it, and in fact, it's the first recording we ever done. The album is called A Cappella.
One day somebody came along and discovered us and started to get us some jobs over in Fort Lee, New Jersey at a Catholic high school. We became friends with the Monsignor there, and we worked for the huge sum of $50 a night. And we did two sets a night on Friday nights at dances. I think it was a once-a-month thing. One day I got a call from Monsignor, and he said, you know what? We could use a group as a fill-in. There's a concert coming up, and one of the groups dropped out, and we need a group to fill in, but there's no pay involved. Of course, I said, Monsignor, you know we don't work for free anymore. He said, maybe if you heard the lineup, you would. And he told us that the group that couldn't make it was the Essex, who had the hit song Easier Said Than Done. They were Marines and they couldn't get leave. And in the show were the Times, the Four Seasons, the Dovells, and the Classics. So of course we said, yes, we'll do the show. And we went to the show, and it was performed in Lodi, New Jersey in an armory. There were 10,000 people there. The one thing I can tell you is that I remember vividly from that show is that when we got up there to sing, it was like the Beatles. As soon as we opened our mouths, they just assumed since we were in that group of artists performing that we must be hot stuff. And so they started screaming as soon as we started singing. When we came off the stage, they actually started to rush us. And I turned to the first tenor and said, what do we do now? Stand here and get our clothes ripped off or run? Willie said, we better run. I don't want to go home naked. And so we ran into the back room where we spent the night singing Dawn with the Four Seasons and the Times, which was great fun. They had just released the song.
Once we went to Murray the K's show at the Brooklyn Fox. And Eddie and the Emeralds went down one of the side streets there, and there happened to be a little doorway, which we started to sing. It wasn't long before quite a few girls started to come around us and listen to us, and we were in our glory. They would ask us, were you anybody? And of course we said we were. Just then, Frankie Valli came out one of the stage doors, and we quickly lost our entire audience.
We got an invitation to go to the RCA building at the New York World's Fair to do a video. My memories of the gig at the RCA building at the World's Fair were pretty cool. When we got there, there was the usual like 1 hour line of people waiting to get into this exhibit. The exhibit was circular, and you walked around and looked through a glass tube down into the studio. I remember us going to the front of the line and people screaming, "Hey, who the heck are you? Why are you going to the front of the line?" We turned back and in our best Manhattan accent said, "We're the Beatles, man."
In the style of the day, everybody really dressed nice when they went on stage. They all had the same outfits. As a matter of fact, we had 4 or 5 different outfits we used. Different jackets, tuxedo pants, same narrow ties from back then. Even out on the street, we had the same same kind of sweaters. Powder blue, zipped all the way down, the group's name. A lot of groups did it that way too. They took pride in themselves and in their group. They felt pride.
We decided to keep our costumes on, or what we were wearing, so that we could be recognized when we went down into the audience, so that, well, you know, we were looking to pick up girls. So if we didn't wear what we wore on stage, they might not have known us.
There were so many things that was going on in the 1960s. A lot of us, we were all divided ethnically and racially, you know, and a lot of us were in street gangs or maybe social street gangs. We really didn't have any exchanges between some of these various ethnic groups, and some animosity between us, you know. Italians didn't like the Irish didn't like the Puerto Ricans, you know, and so forth. So there was animosity between us, you know. But I think the thing that really broke down the barrier of ethnic rivalry was the fact that if you were in a group, you were able to go from one neighborhood to another. You had free passage. If you happened to be Italian and you went into a Puerto Rican neighborhood, you wouldn't be beaten on, you wouldn't be jumped, you wouldn't be hurt, because this group could sing. One good thing that came out of that is that there were a lot of what they call UN groups, or they call it United Nations, but UN meaning singing groups that were ethnically or racially mixed.
Joe, do you remember the time we went down to Grand Street, and that was sort of like an area where we shouldn't have went because of the gangs, and all of a sudden we were surrounded by a group of individuals, and when we started doing after that we became friends, and as a result met Winnie Lovin, whose name is Blue, who sings with Human Hands. So that was quite an experience where we didn't get our butts kicked. But that's what music did. It opened doors, saved you from getting a whooping, and it was just fun. We've been anywhere. All we had to do was sing.
We went places where racial slurs were made at us and things like that. But I remember one time when we were in Fort Lee doing a gig, We were told by somebody that there was a gang waiting outside to beat us up when we left. We made a call on a payphone to some of the guys over in our group to get them to come over in a car and pick us up for a quick escape or bring some mass force. And they told us, "The hell with you, man, we're at a party, you're on your own." So I remember towards the end of the night, we were getting ready to finish up, and we finished up and we walked down on the floor. A fellow walked up to me, why I don't know, I guess I was the skinniest guy in the group then. And he said, "I heard you guys are gonna beat up on us." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "I heard you guys made a call and you got a bunch of guys outside waiting to jump us when we go out." And I replied to him, "We didn't come here to fight, we came here to sing. We're here for a good time, and yeah, they're outside, but as long as you don't bother us, there'll be no fight going on." Well, we got about 2 blocks of the 6 or 8 blocks we had to walk to get to the bus stop at the George Washington Bridge when they realized that we didn't have any backup. And we ran the other 6 blocks, and thank God there was a bus pulling up when we got there. So we jumped on the bus and took off to New York.
The things I remember the most about the 1960s was the Vietnam War and the commotion and the grief that it brought to so many Americans. But the thing that I really remember the most was the music.
It was the age of innocence. We sang because we loved the sound. Just to be able to listen to 4 other guys and yourself move around on the musical scale and create just such vibrant music, to me was incredible. I mean, we were singing about songs of love, love lost, the girlfriend that got away.
What I remember about the 60s most is, strange enough, what I don't remember. And I don't remember snow, I don't remember rain. You remember those days on the beach with your girl, stretched out on a blanket, soaking up the sun, back when the sun wouldn't kill you, and you could eat red meat and smoke. Just those enjoyable summer days, listening to that transistor radio that all the girls had. Came in like 4 colors, and if you were lucky, your girl had the black one. Otherwise, she had the pink one. The one tinny speaker that was in it, but it got the point across. And even afterwards, at night, it was the same thing. Pick her up, take a ride, go cruise. Every town had its own special circuit that you would follow. See your buddies, see what was going on, stop, grab a bite to eat. No pressure.
The social calendar, for lack of a better word, always contained Friday evening dances in the local places in Bayonne, Jersey City, Union City. These places specialized in bringing all of the local people together and always provided some great entertainment.
The boardwalk. Well, there was a lot of boardwalks, still are in New York and New Jersey. Coney Island, of course, in New York. But in New Jersey, one of the true hotbeds for a cappella, we had the Asbury Park Boardwalk and the Seaside Heights Boardwalk. Now, you also had Atlantic City and Wildwood and several others, but really, people came to Asbury Park and Seaside Heights, and you'd find groups all up and down the boardwalk, especially from 1960 through 1965 in particular.
My
1960s, there was a lot of social unrest, so there was a lot of musical creativity that was going on, and teenagers were on top of it all.
We got together almost every night. We'd be down on the stoop, I'd meet them up on 77th Street. Sometimes I'd go over to Hal's house, who lived on 77th. They're all within a 2-block radius of 77th and 2nd Avenue. And I'd go up and we'd listen to records, and Hal was into every singer and every label and what color the label was, who wrote the songs, what this guy who sang backgrounds in this used to be, or now that he's a lead singer in this group.
And we would be up till 3 or 4 in the morning, again with the old Webcore reel-to-reel tape recorder. We would sing. We would do impersonations of our favorite singers like Jackie Wilson and the Duprees and whoever. And we also did a lot of the Righteous Brothers. I was Bill Medley and Charlie was Bobby Hatfield. And we sang for hours doing some Righteous Brothers songs and had a great time. Our parents didn't appreciate it too much, as they interrupted us quite a few times to tell us to stop and go to sleep. And we would stop and then wait about 10 minutes and start again, trying to sing lowly so they wouldn't hear us.
Let me begin first by going to myth number 1. The doo-wop sound died out as a result of the British invasion, with the beginning of the Beatles coming into our shores early 1964.
We had a chance of signing a contract with Roulette Records back in the early 60s, and they had given us some songs and then sent us home to learn them. And in between that time, the Beatles came out, which probably happened to a lot of groups, and just when we went back, they asked us, can you do this? Can you play an instrument? And it didn't deter us. We just kept going and singing a cappella.
I don't think any of us really thought about the British invasion as being a threat to us at all, because we were just doing our own thing. It's like rap today. Rap originated in urban cities, in New York, in LA, in Detroit. And it was and just like rap doesn't feel threatened by any other type of musical art form. The same way it is with a cappella. We never felt that the British coming to America were threatening our style of music, because for us they weren't a threat at all.
There was no competition for a cappella. A cappella was something that competed against everything else because it was so small and so specialized.
A lot of the major record companies, like I mentioned before, like Atlantic or Mercury, they kind of looked at us as being just amateurs, and we were amateurs, even though our records were played on the radio and were being sold in stores. We were amateurs. We didn't have that polished feel to it. We didn't have that polished feel like the groups of the 1950s.
I wanna be loved by someone who'll have me. I wanna be kissed by someone who needs me. Will I need it so bad? Oh, yeah, so bad. Need you so bad. I wanna be thrilled and held close at hand. Who'll answer my plea? I'm lonely, can't you see? Will I need it so bad? Yeah, so bad. All of my life I've been lonely. Well, I need it so bad. So bad. Need you so bad. So bad. Need you so bad. Ooh, 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 ooh.
I started working at a club when I got a little fed up with the politics and the recording business and thought I could take some of my experience out to the nightclub scene, and I built a great recording studio kind of PA system at this club called JP's in Manhattan. And Ringo showed up there one night. We got to hang out a little bit together at our little captain's table, a sort of private table that we had at the club. So that completed the Fab Four circle for me. I met them all, spent some time with all of them, did a little recording with all of them, except Ringo, who ran off at some point.
In the early 70s, I got drafted and went in the Air Force in the late 60s to the early 70s, and sometimes I came home for a show, and then when I got out of the service in the early 70s, there was some other revival oldie shows going on, and Acappella was big.
Hi, my name is Vinnie Calamito. I'm bringing back memories of all the Acappella groups in the 60s. I remember down here, we had the Heartaches. Throughout the city, we had the Persuasions, we had the Savoys, we had the Concepts. They were really good times. I wish I was about 15, 16 years old again, because I truly, truly enjoyed it.
To me, there is no greater rush than singing doo-wop, quality doo-wop, in front of an audience who's appreciative of it and loves the music that we grew up with.
In our early recordings, we did a lot of Curtis material, Gypsy Woman, Man Oh Man, and we used to play this club out in Chicago called The Quiet Night.
I always say the Blue Onion.
Quiet Night. Quiet Night. And Curtis, Jerry Butler, and Chuck Boxdale of the Dales came to our show. One night we were playing in Chicago. To our surprise, the guy told us that Curtis and Jerry Butler and Chuck was in the audience. Anyway, we did the show when Curtis came back with Jerry Butler and Chuck, and just told us, man, he just wanted to thank us for doing this music, making him money.
Yeah. Chuck said he was shaking his head like this. I said, why are you shaking your head? He says, I'm thinking how much money we could have saved without a band. You know what I mean? If we didn't
Chuck Boxdale?
Yeah.
With the band.
I guess I'm one of the lucky ones from the 60s who was able to this day to continue following and living my dream.
We actually auditioned. We went to United Artists for an audition, and they basically said to us, too bad you showed up today, we just signed 2 groups. And that was the Jive 5, who recorded, of course, I'm a Happy Man on that label, and was also Little Anthony Imperials, who came out with Hurt So Bad and On the Outside Looking In, and covers like that. We went to one label and we got beat out by Peaches and Herb. We went to another label, and I remember them saying that we were every oldies group rolled into one. We were just 10 years too late. Not too long after that, James Myers and myself were drafted and went into the Army.
We were guys that just loved to sing together, as I said, anytime, any place. We never made a record, only a demo. And when we were on and we hit those notes, the hairs on our arms used to curl. And when that happened, we used to want to hold those notes for what seemed like forever. I never really found the same magic as I did with them.
We created a unique sound that sort of caught on.
What we did, the Acappella, was probably the forefront for the genres today of hip-hop, spoken word, and just a great experience and glad to be part of it.
It was like in a bowl. All the different styles of music were in the bowl, and all around the rim there were companies and agents and producers and arrangers just throwing money into the bowl, and over on the side was a cappella, just making do on its own. And it did it. That's the important part. And it was done by kids, teenagers, who bought this style and brought it to the forefront on their own, a style that had never been done before in public. It was done in cathedrals, choirs, Gregorian chants, but never just for pleasure, never just for its own purpose, just to be heard. But it was the kids who did it.
And when we started singing in the 1960s, we never knew it would be what it is today. And my objective, and many of us, is to we want to tell the public that there was a time period, a very short time period of only 10 years, that had a significant impact in rock and roll, and that was the a cappella era.
The golden age of a cappella was truly a remarkable time in rock and roll history. It's a time period that not enough people or historians know much about. The a cappella era of the 60s was the main catalyst in preserving the group sound of the 1950s, right along with oldie radio programming and reissues of early group recordings. The unsung heroes of a cappella, the true music of the street corner singers, will always be remembered for their love of the R&B vocal group sound. This, then, is their legacy.
Well, the 60s are gone, and so is my Chevy. My hair is gray, and I'm pretty heavy. The 1960s are a thing of the past. Street corner harmony was really a blast. My record collection is as large as can be. Persuasions, five fashions, concepts and larks, zircons, nutmegs, and all those vocal parts. I don't care what people say. A cappella is here to stay.
Have your fun, carefree one. Don't be a bad girl, because I love you. I love you. I remember not so long ago, you were a good girl and I was your boy. But it hurts me to be put aside like last year's Christmas toy. Sad day when love is gone and there's no more to say. Have your fun, carefree one, but don't be a bad girl, because I love you. Open up your heart, recall how it used to be. Remember all the love we found on Harmony Street. There was a place that we used to go when we were feeling down and we were low. We looked into each other's eyes and found the road that led us to Harmony Street. Open up your heart, recall how it used to be. Remember all the love we found on Harmony.